What's going on, everybody? This is Jared coming back to you again on the Keystonecarry channel. Today we're going to talk about my first AR15 build. And the one I'm going to talk about is this 16-inch 5.56. Technically, that's not my first AR15. It's definitely not my first AR15 build, but I consider it my first AR15 build. And I will go into why I say that and why I believe that when we get into this video. Let's make it happen.
I'm on my mission, oh yeah. New rebels, we the new rebels, new rebels, we the new rebels. They be saying good is bad, they be saying bad is good. Everybody got it misunderstood. I don't know what happened, everybody get the tripping, all the Christian get the slipping. Seem like everybody switching, everybody get the going off the deep end. They was doing good until the weekend. They ain't hit the floor with a knee bend. They was going strong but had a weekend. Oh no, I wanted the truth. Say it was good, it's good. What's bad is bad. I wanted the truth. Say it was good, it's good. What's bad is bad. New rebels, yes, we make us new rebels. New rebels, yes, we make us new rebels. Yeah.
It goes without saying that the AR-15 is quite literally America's rifle. For good reason. It's a very modular rifle. It's accurate, easy to modify, easy to maintain. They're just beautiful pieces of equipment, and in the hands of anyone with a basic foundational set of skills with shooting, they can be a very effective tool. I can remember back when my wife and I just got married, and I just had this desire to have an AR-15. But at the time, this was during the election for Obama, and it was the gun scare. We were all scared of gun control and all the guns that they were going to ban. And so there was no ammunition. Gun prices were through the roof. It was stupid expensive to get into any kind of an AR-15. So it was off the table. So I ended up getting a tactical shotgun instead of an AR-15. But I just remember longing for the day when I could get an AR-15 and be able to have a modern weapon to defend my home with. Shortly after my son was born, I sold all of my Supermotos that I used to have. I took that money and I said, I'm gonna build at least one rifle because I've always wanted to. I'm gonna make it my own, and I'm just gonna go on the journey of building an AR-15, and that's what I did. And that kicked off my entire journey, literally into social media, into my business, into shooting in general. I mean, I had shot before, but this AR-15 that I'm about to talk about is literally my gateway drug to getting into the gun industry and becoming so consumed with the different innovations in the industry and the different ways to run and modify and use AR-15s and any other modern kind of rifle. Now, during the intro, I did say that I was going to be talking about my 16-inch carbine, and it's really funny because I've had this now probably for 4 years, and I've really never done a video on it. But when I say that it's my first AR-15, that's technically incorrect. So my first AR-15 was an old Clinton era Colt 9mm. It had the carry handle on the top that was built into the receiver, totally old school. My second AR was a SIG 716 Patrol. I ended up getting them through a motorcycle trade of sorts. So I did have ARs. The 716 is not an AR-15, but you get it. So I did have AR platforms prior to doing this 16-inch build. But if I really want to get technical, my first AR-15 build was really this 7.5-inch 300 Blackout. If you're on my Instagram at all, or you've seen my Instagram, you know this rifle. This is a very familiar rifle to you. You will recognize it. That's technically the first rifle that I built from components and kind of made my own rifle. But I consider my 16-inch carbine, this burnt bronze gem, to actually be my first rifle. Let's talk about why. One of the first reasons I consider this gun to be my first AR-15 build is because it's the first one that I took to a training course. This was the first time that I actually got behind a rifle with an instructor and went to learn skills that are going to help me better be prepared to defend my family. And that was 4 years ago now. It's also the first rifle that I ever put more than 1,000 rounds through. Up until the point of me getting into AR-15s and really wanting to train with my sidearms, I had never spent money on buying bulk ammunition. I always either hand loaded it myself, or I just did not shoot enough to justify buying that much bulk ammunition. So this was the first time I really ran a gun hard. This was also the first rifle that I felt confident defending my home with. All of my other rifles were either for hunting or just for plinking or just having fun like that. This was the first rifle that I built specifically to fill the task of taking care of my family. One of the other reasons that I consider this my first rifle is because this was really the first rifle that I ever had that I felt like was a quote-unquote fighting rifle. It was something that if I had to face an enemy or face some danger in my home or stare down some kind of a rabid animal, I could do it. I could use this rifle, I could put down pests, I could hunt, I could defend my home. It felt like a rifle that I could be confident in. And that was the first time that I ever felt that with a firearm. Everybody already has seen this has a really awesome burnt bronze Cerakote. This was the first rifle that I ever did Cerakote myself on. It took me an entire Saturday, literally from morning until way past dark, to do this rifle. I didn't know how to strip it down properly. I didn't have all the tools and punches and all that stuff, so it took me way longer than it would now, whereas now I can rip down an AR-15 in 10 minutes. But at the time, this was a huge accomplishment for me, and that also factors into my decision to call this my first AR-15. I remember directly after Cerakoting this thing, I had that Storm Mountain course, which was my first official training course. And I was so nervous to beat the gun up because I had just done the Cerakote, but I said, screw it, I'm gonna run it hard. And I did, and we were wearing plate carriers, I had mags on me, we were crawling through concrete culverts and all kinds of crazy stuff. And the Cerakote still looks beautiful today. And yeah, there's a couple scuffs and scratches, but to me, that's nostalgic. That's history. That's a story that's been painted into the physical body of the rifle. And this thing's just nostalgic for me because of all of the experiences that I've had with it. So although it is not technically my first AR-15 build, I do believe that this is the flagship for me. This was the rifle that set the course for my addiction with AR-15s as a modern rifle, as my fighting carbine, as my home defense rifle. It set the tone for my future revolving around modern fighting rifles. So we talked about a little bit of the history of the rifle. Let's talk about the build. And there's nothing fancy on this rifle at all. As you can tell, it is more modern. It has a longer rail. It does have a LPVO on the top and an offset dot, but let's go through it. Let's start over at the stock. So this has a Mission First tactical stock. These are all right. I have other stocks that I kind of prefer nowadays, but I got this about 4 years ago. Still digging it, still works. No complaints really with that other than sling attachments. There's not really many great ways to do that, but with a quick attach on the bottom, it's worked well. Standard buffer tube, castle nut, standard charging handle. The lower is Aero Precision. The trigger is a Geisley SDE trigger. I freaking love that trigger. I'm just running a Magpul grip. The entire upper receiver and the rail and the barrel came from Palmetto State Armory. So I did buy this as a complete upper from Palmetto. And at the time, I had a little bit different of a mindset around rifles, and we'll get into that in a second. It is a 1-in-7 twist, 16-inch barrel. Up top, we have a Strike Eagle 1-6 on Vortex offset mount, and then I have one of their Vortex Venom, their little 3 MOA red dots on a 45-degree cant, and that has worked out really well for me. There's nothing else fancy with the dust cover. That's standard. The other lower parts kit, standard. Bolt catch, standard. There's nothing else really fancy about this rifle. On the rail, it is a key mod, and all of my stuff that I've done now is all M-LOK, but this was my first, again, my first AR-15 build. I had no idea. So I went with key mod. I've got some little scales on it because this thing gets really hot. And then I have a little Picatinny section on the bottom where I will mount my bipod. On the end, we have a Silencer Co. ASR flash hider, and I do run my suppressor on this sometimes. I am running an Anderson Manufacturing adjustable gas block. And we'll get into some of the parts, the things I like and don't like then. But that's a really fast rundown on this. I'm running 2 QD mounts for my Blue Force Gear sling, just a 2-point sling. Nothing fancy, guys. Super simple build. So one of the reasons I wanted a 16-inch carbine, and keep in mind that up to this point I had already built a 7.5-inch 300 Blackout, which was a pistol, and then I applied for a tax stamp. I just wanted something that I did not need to ask the government permission for, that I didn't have to get a tax stamp, I didn't have to register it. So I thought a 16-inch carbine would be a perfect balance. I won't have to worry about braces or anything. I can slap a stock on it, do whatever I want with it, we're good to go. The other thing that I was thinking was, I would like to build this thing kind of into a DMR. And over time, it's changed drastically. When I originally built this rifle, I had an EOTech on top, and then I switched out to a Hollow Sun, and now I've got the Vortex Strike Eagle and the Offset Venom. Just last week, I had a Spark AR on top of this thing, but I wanted to switch around my optics and put an LPVO on this. I plan to go up to the cabin and do some coyote hunting in the very near future, and it is obviously better to do that with an LPVO. But it has worn many different shoes over the years and filled many different roles. It's also killed a lot of little critters during predator season in Pennsylvania. As I stated, the barrel is a 16-inch 1-in-7 twist. Now that's gonna lend itself better to heavier bullets, but I shoot a lot of 55 grain full metal jacket for training, works out fine, never had any issues. I do find that 60 grain and heavier do shoot better out of this particular rifle. Now when I first built it, the accuracy was a lot better than it is now. Over the years, over the last 4 years, I've put over 20,000 rounds through this particular rifle, and then that's not a joke, that's not a typo. I know everybody on the internet likes to say, oh, I did 10,000 rounds. This has over 20,000 rounds through it. Up to this point, it was my only 5.56, and I have bought so much 5.56, it's ridiculous. The accuracy obviously was a little better at first. Now, I'm not gonna say my barrel is shot out, but the accuracy at 100 yards is about 1.5 inches. With just reman ammo, I'm getting about 2-inch groups at 100. With my hand loads, I can definitely tighten that up, but accuracy is, I'm not gonna call this thing a precision rifle, I'll put it that way. If we're looking at the price point to build a rifle like this, I would estimate that you could do this build like I have it here in the $1,400 to $1,600 range. And I wanted to touch on this a little bit because my mindset around carbines has changed a lot over the years. I don't necessarily want to build cheap rifles anymore. And there was a time when that was all I could afford. And I would never have thought of getting a BCM or doing a full aero build or a Daniel Defense. But I can tell you that those rifles, with me having enough time running them now, they are different than getting a Palmetto or an Anderson. And there are major differences in the way things work together on some of them. Yes, sometimes you can just pay for a name, but I can tell you that when you get super cheap stuff, you're often gonna get bad tolerances, poor quality parts, you're gonna be missing set screws and gas blocks, or roll pins are gonna be sticking out real goofy, your gas block is gonna be cocked sideways, your gas tube will be bent. There's reasons why things are cheap. And the fairy tale that everybody says is they're all made by the same people. And while yes, forgings are made by a couple different manufacturers, there's a lot of other steps that go into building an AR-15. So do I regret building a Palmetto upper? No, I don't. I've honestly not had issues with this upper at all. I don't have issues with it running and cycling, suppressed or unsuppressed. It runs everything perfectly fine. So I'm not gonna say that it was a bad investment, and I don't regret it at all. And to be honest, it was one of those last minute decisions before the training course when I realized it was gonna be cheaper for me to build a complete 5.56 than to take my 300 Blackout that I have right here and take this thing and go do training with this rifle. And that's kind of crazy to think about because that was a huge deciding factor to me in building a 16-inch 5.56. Just the fact that the ammunition was so inexpensive versus 300 Blackout. Don't get me wrong, I'm a 300 Blackout fanboy. You all know that, but I digress. My favorite parts about this rifle are the fact that even though it started out as a budget build, I've put quality parts into key positions so that this thing runs phenomenally. That Geisley SDE trigger is awesome. I love it so much. It's a super crisp 2-stage trigger. It's not heavy, it's not gritty, it just breaks when it needs to break and you can feel the reset very cleanly. It's no secret that I love Vortex and I run a lot of their optics. So running Vortex optics on here, even though they aren't the top of the line Vortex optics, give me the ability to see clearly and hit targets even at distances of 200 to 300 yards. I like that even though it's a budget build, it's super light. There's nothing bulky or heavy about this at all. I can run around all day with it. I can hike and hunt, and when I go coyote hunting up in northern Pennsylvania, I'm hiking miles. I'm walking literal miles back into the middle of nowhere. So having a rifle that weighs 15 pounds, it's not really realistic, especially for hunting predators. When we're deer hunting and you're just kind of hiking back in and sitting down for the day and waiting, I don't mind a heavy rifle as much. but when I'm really hiking around, having a light 5.56 is awesome. The 5.56 caliber obviously has super light recoil, so when I'm on the range, I can do quick follow-up shots. Reloads with this thing are a breeze. Just shooting in general, doing any run and gun drills, it's just super easy to handle. It's honestly addicting to shoot. Some of my favorite aspects about this rifle are the fact that it's super flickable, it's super easy to maneuver. Transitioning from one target to another is a piece of cake. Effortlessly, you can transition from the first target to the second to the third. You can transition from far targets to close targets. It points very well. It looks good and functions awesome. I'm not the guy that cares first about looks, but I do care how my rifle looks, especially being a photographer. I like to take photos of my guns, and having a little bit of flair with the burnt bronze adds a nice little touch of class to this rifle. So now, when I'm looking back on the decisions I made building this rifle, I'm asking myself, would I do this exact build again? And at the phase that I'm in now, I would say no. If I went back to the past and I was, I was in the exact same position, I had the exact same funds, of course I would do this build again. But right now, no, I wouldn't. I would save up my money and get a BCM or Daniel Defense or an Aero Precision, something that is a higher end AR-15. And that's because I truly believe in the buy once, cry once mentality if you can afford it. I would never recommend someone go out and spend recklessly on an AR-15 and drop $2,000 on it if they can't afford it. If you can't, definitely look into these budget options and you can build a really effective rifle. Just know that with certain aspects, you're not going to get the quality that you would of a higher end rifle. With that being said though, I have no regrets with this rifle. There's nothing in me that wishes that I would not have built this rifle. I'm extremely happy with it. And honestly, I will probably never get rid of this rifle because of all of the history and the memories and the fact that this was such a stepping stone for me in my journey of firearm ownership and training. Overall, this rifle's just been so solid for me. And it also has the highest round count out of any other carbine that I own, which is pretty impressive considering it's a Palmetto upper. Even after all of that ammunition through it, it still cycles perfectly fine. Everything functions perfectly fine. There's no issues with it whatsoever. It runs everything I throw at it. I can't complain about it at all. Building a rifle can be a ton of fun, especially if it's your first one. As you're embarking on that journey and you're navigating the unknowns and you're trying to learn about these crazy AR-15s and how they work, and you're overwhelmed and you don't have all the tools, it's an awesome journey to look back on. And I'm super thankful that I decided to build a couple rifles, and I've just continued to build rifles ever since. Building a rifle is just like building Legos. You start out with molds and certain parameters that you have to stick within. But then after you get past the basics, the upper receiver, lower, bolt carrier group, everything else is up to you. Different rails and muzzle devices and barrels and optics and stocks and grips and magazines, controls, everything. You can change everything on these rifles, and that is why they are such an addictive platform. I hope you guys enjoyed my story, a little bit of the background of this rifle. This is a rifle that up until this point, like I said, I have not talked about. So hopefully that was enjoyable, hearing a little bit of the backstory, a little bit of the why and the how and what I was thinking with this build. But I'm kind of tired of talking about guns and I'd rather go hit the range. So I think I'm going to do that. Guys, take care. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Let me know. What was your first AR-15 build? Give me some specs in the comments below. I'd love to start up some conversations around that. Guys, until next time, stay well, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.